This story is titled, My Boyfriend Threatened to K*LL Me If I Ever Cheated. I posted online, and strangers helped me escape with the police. My boyfriend kept accusing me of cheating, and then he started saying he'd kill me if I ever betrayed him. I posted about it online, hoping maybe I was overreacting, but the replies terrified me. Everyone insisted I was in danger. That's when I realized I had to get out, fast. With police help, I left everything I owned behind and ran for my life. I'm 25, and my boyfriend George, 28, and I had been together for years. We weren't just dating casually. This was serious. He'd been planning to propose to me this summer, right after I finished my second college degree. We'd talked endlessly about our future. The wedding, the honeymoon, building a house together, and someday having a baby. I thought we were building something strong and unshakable, and I truly believed we loved each other deeply. But the truth is, it wasn't as perfect as I wanted to believe. Our relationship had always been complicated. We were both anxious people with scars that ran deep. I'd grown up feeling abandoned, forced to figure out life on my own as a kid. And George, he carried wounds from a lifetime of emotional and physical abuse. His dad, his brother, even his ex-wife had hurt him in ways that still haunted him. To anyone looking in from the outside, George would seem like a good man. And sometimes he really was. He could be so loving and attentive. He encouraged me every chance he got, told me he wanted nothing more than to see me succeed and be happy. But living with George felt like living with two different people. One moment, he was the sweet, thoughtful man I adored. The next, it was like a switch flipped, and I was staring into the face of someone I barely recognized. When he asked me to sign a prenup, I didn't argue. I understood. His ex-wife had cleaned him out during their divorce and left him homeless for months. When he shut down and withdrew emotionally whenever I got stressed, I tried to be patient. I told myself it made sense. His father used to explode whenever there was tension in the house, and this was just George's way of coping. Over and over, I rationalized his behavior. But lately, things had started to take a darker turn. It began with small things. Every couple of weeks, George would look me in the eye and ask if I was cheating on him. At first, I brushed it off. His ex had cheated on him repeatedly, so I thought this was just the fallout from that betrayal. I tried to soothe his fears however I could. I showed him my texts. I let him answer my phone when it buzzed. I handed over my call logs and let him scroll through my Snapchat messages. Anything to prove there was nothing to worry about. But his suspicions kept growing. One day, he claimed he had proof. He said he'd found a takeout bag in the trash, the kind that holds 2 dinner orders, and accused me of going out with another man. I calmly explained that it was from a week earlier when I'd had lunch with my sister. I'd brought leftovers home, but they'd spoiled, so I tossed them. He didn't believe me until I pulled up Instagram photos of me and my sister at the restaurant that day. Only then did he back down. Another time, he swore he'd seen a picture of me on some random app, standing in my underwear in what he said was another man's house. I asked to see the picture. He said it had already been deleted. He admitted the shot was only from the shoulders down. I told him to go through every single piece of lingerie I owned. I even reminded him I didn't own a single black bra because I usually wore white shirts, and dark colors always showed through. Finally, he remembered the woman in the photo had been wearing a black bra and realized it couldn't have been me. But nothing could have prepared me for the last time. That's when everything unraveled. It had been a brutal week for me. Midterms were in full swing, and I'd been spending hours holed up in the library, camped out at my usual spot by the window. George had even joined me a few times, bringing me snacks and helping me study. But when I'm stressed, I tend to withdraw into myself. I don't mean to shut people out, but I needed every ounce of focus for school. George, though, started acting nervous. On edge. One night, I knocked over a glass of water from my nightstand and let out a string of curse words. George wasn't even in the room at the time, but later, he accused me of taking my stress out on him. No matter how many times I insisted it wasn't about him, he wouldn't let it go. He grew quiet and moody. The next evening, I was packing up a box to send to my parents when I heard loud music coming from the kitchen. I found George cooking dinner, something we usually loved doing together. I smiled, trying to join him, but he snapped at me to leave. He accused me of being rude, of disrespecting him all week. I reminded him that I'd apologized for everything he said I'd done wrong. I begged him to stop holding on to old grievances, but it was no use. The argument escalated until I screamed that he was making my life hell. He responded by calling me a stupid bitch and a cunt. In return, I called him a childish asshole. He stormed out to buy cigarettes. I grabbed my bag and went back to the library, desperate to clear my head. I didn't return home until 2 a.m. The first thing I noticed was the front window, shattered. My stomach dropped. George had thrown and broken things before, but never at me, never anything of mine. I was terrified of what mood I'd find him in. He was waiting for me when I walked in. I didn't say a word. I was exhausted and had an exam in the morning. I went straight to the shower and then laid out of bed on the couch because I didn't want to be near him. That's when he barged in, holding a pair of my underwear. "Why is there fresh cum on these?" he demanded. I stared at him in disbelief. I'd been battling a yeast infection for days. He knew that, and the discharge from the infection, combined with the cream medication I was using, had left a white stain. I explained this, but he didn't want to hear it. We fought again. When he realized I was right, he shifted his accusations. He started yelling about how disrespectful I'd been lately. When I asked for specifics, he said I hadn't walked him out of the library the last time he visited. I pointed out that he'd always left before I was finished studying. Eventually, he admitted he was grasping at straws, but insisted he still felt hurt. I tried to calm him down. I reminded him how much I loved him, how we were best friends, how I'd never do anything to hurt him. He cut me off with a cold laugh. "Go tell that to your therapist," he sneered. I curled up on the couch and plugged my ears as he screamed that I wasn't a victim. Finally, he left me alone. I cried myself to sleep and failed my test the next day because I'd been too exhausted to focus. The following afternoon, things seemed normal again. George admitted he'd driven by the library and seen me studying through the window. He knew I hadn't been cheating. That should have reassured me, but instead, it made me feel sick. Even with his own eyes as proof, he'd still accused me. A few nights later, we were watching Horns together, and I made an offhand comment about how unrealistic it seemed for someone's best friend to suddenly snap and turn into a murderer without warning. George disagreed. He said he believed anyone could hide their true nature and that people can snap at any moment. Then he added, almost casually, "If you ever cheated on me, I think I'd be angry enough to kill you, and I'd probably succeed." The next day, he said it again. This time, he framed it as a joke. But my stomach flipped all the same. That's when I realized I might not be safe anymore. George used to be my whole world, and even as I packed my things, every part of me screamed that I was throwing away the only real love I'd ever known. It felt like I was betraying my best friend for no good reason, especially when I caught sight of the dry erase note he'd left on the fridge before leaving for work. "Dogs pooped this morning. They've both been fed, and Pook's got her medication. Have a great day, honey. I love you." That one note nearly broke me right there. As I shoved random things into a bag, I kept thinking, who the hell forgets to pack socks? But I couldn't stop to fix my mistakes. There were 3 large, intimidating cops standing in my living room, and the victim advocate, the kind woman who'd been by my side all morning, gently warned me to hurry. She said we didn't want George showing up in the middle of this. The thought made my stomach clench. I didn't have time to think about what I was leaving behind. But God, it hurt. So many little pieces of my life had to stay. I know, deep down, that they're just objects, worthless junk, as some people would call it. But to me, it was my home, my sanctuary, the things I'd chosen, collected, and held onto for years. My gaming PC that I built with my own hands. The sunflower pattern dishes I hunted down at a thrift shop because they reminded me of summers with my grandma. My sprouting plants in the kitchen windowsill, their buds just days away from blooming. My father's handmade wooden bookcase. He built it for me as a graduation gift from his workshop. The Harry Potter paperbacks, all dog-eared and taped together, survivors of my childhood. The polka dot comforter my sister passed down to me when she got married. Old birthday cards stuffed in a shoebox. Each item felt like it carried a little piece of me, and none of it would fit in the bag. I wanted to scoop it all up and cling to it forever. But I couldn't. I wouldn't see any of it again. I kept telling myself, it's not the end of the world. I'll buy new plates someday. New socks. New comforters. The only thing that mattered was getting out alive. Even the dogs were on edge. They didn't understand why their calm house was suddenly full of strangers, or why I seemed to be falling apart. One barked nonstop. The other kept pacing in circles, her tail tucked tight. Somehow I managed to wrangle them, plus my hastily packed bag, into the car. Then we drove to the police station so I could figure out my next steps. I hadn't called my family yet because admitting all of this out loud would make it real. But I knew once George came home and saw my stuff was gone, he was going to lose it. He might even call the cops and file a missing persons report. The call to my dad wasn't as bad as I'd feared. He's always been the one I could tell anything without being judged, even though we hadn't spoken much lately. He and my mom were away on a camping trip, but when I said, "Dad, things are bad. I don't feel safe," he didn't hesitate. No questions, no judgment, just, "Come here, pack up and join us." It was hundreds of miles away, in the middle of nowhere, but that sounded perfect. Somewhere George wouldn't find me, somewhere I could breathe. So I started driving. 3 hours into what should have been an 8-hour drive, my phone started blowing up. Calls, texts, back-to-back notifications. The victim advocate had warned me about this and even helped me draft a message to send if George tried contacting me. The text was short and careful. "I don't feel safe right now. I need space. Please don't contact me. I'll reach out when I'm ready." But I was stupid. I let my emotions get the better of me. I read the flood of sad, panicked messages he sent. Then, even dumber, I answered one of his calls. His voice was raw, cracking with panic. "Please don't do this. I don't understand. I'm having a panic attack. You're my whole life. We're supposed to get engaged. All I've ever done is love you." I bit my lip so hard it bled. I cut him off mid-sentence. "I don't feel safe. Don't call me again. Your behavior is unstable, and you need to go to a hospital." That set him off. "Is this because of your therapist? Is that fucker filling your head with lies about me?" "No," I said firmly. He kept talking, asking if I'd stop taking my anti-anxiety meds, but I didn't answer. I just repeated the same points, calm, firm, detached, until I finally hung up and blocked him. Then I called my therapist to warn him George might show up at the office. Within minutes, George did call the therapy center. Whatever he said was bad enough that the whole building went on lockdown. I was told later that my therapist had to have a cop escort him home. George was warned. Contact me or the center again and he'd be arrested. So yeah, I'd not only put myself in danger, but now a whole building full of people who were just trying to get help too. I still think about that every night when I can't sleep. By the time I reached my parents, I was running on fumes, mentally, emotionally, physically. My dad let me hug him and cry into his shoulder for a full 30 seconds before he pulled away and cracked a joke about the dogs. Then he wiped my laptop and phone clean, muttering about keyloggers and spyware, while he made small talk about anything but what had happened. That's his way of handling things. And honestly, it worked. For the first time in days, I felt my pulse slow. My mom, on the other hand, reacted the way I expected and feared. She's always liked George. She once told me he made me normal. And when I hinted before that he was controlling, she brushed it off, saying, "Don't push him away. Controlling isn't so bad if he's good for you." So it wasn't surprising that she kept bringing him up. "He's such a kind, smart man," she said softly, as though I'd overreacted. She pressed for every detail, trying to piece together how her perfect son-in-law could possibly be dangerous. She even asked if she could talk to him, maybe convince him to seek help. I told her, as gently as I could, that it wouldn't work. George didn't believe he had a problem, and even if he went to treatment, I couldn't risk going back. Her response? "I'm just glad you weren't killed." That was it. "No, I'm proud of you for leaving." "No, I'm sorry you went through this." Just relief that I was alive. And in that moment, I realized something heartbreaking. My mom couldn't be the person I needed her to be. Not now. Maybe not ever. I was warned ahead of time that the place they were moving me into didn't allow pets. My parents were caught up with their own lives and couldn't take my dogs, so I found myself stuck between trying to figure out if I could afford to kennel them until graduation or if it would just be kinder to find them new homes. Honestly, I'm selfish enough that rehoming them wasn't even an option I could think about for more than a second. I couldn't lose my dogs. I could let everything else in my life go, my home, my clothes, my job, but if I lost them, I don't think I'd survive it. They're my babies. They used to curl up in bed with me every night before George banished them to the living room. They're the only ones I could hug and cry into when the world felt like it was falling apart around me. They were my lifeline in the middle of this nightmare. So I swallowed my pride and picked up the phone to call Sarah, a friend I hadn't really stayed in touch with because, with George, it was easier to keep as few connections as possible. Fewer friends meant fewer chances of someone texting me too often or saying something that might spark George's suspicion. To my surprise, she sounded happy to hear from me. I asked if she knew anyone who could take my dogs for a couple of days while I figured out what to do. Sarah didn't hesitate. She called a friend of hers right there on the spot, and her friend agreed to help. Then Sarah asked me if everything was okay. For a split second, I considered lying, brushing it off with something casual. But deep down, I felt like I owed her the truth, or at least part of it. So I told her that things were chaotic right now, and I'd explain later. My new roommate barely got any notice that someone was moving in. My advocate moved fast and wanted me out of my situation immediately. So by the time my roommate found out, I'd already dumped all my belongings in her space. I felt guilty about it, so I taped a Butterfinger candy bar and a little apology note to her bedroom door. Later, I'll stock the fridge with booze and let her know she's welcome to it. My poor attempt at bribing her into forgiving me. She's out of town right now, so we haven't met yet, but I noticed Game of Thrones magnets on the fridge. That'll make for a decent icebreaker when she comes back. To feel safer walking around, I changed a few things about myself, nothing George would recognize. Logically, I know there's no way he could know where I am or how to find me. But even so, I couldn't help but feel paranoid. I pocketed a stun gun and silently prayed it wouldn't go off by accident. Eventually, I found a kennel for my dogs that felt okay. Honestly, it looked better than some daycare centers I've seen. They had grassy playpens, kiddie pools, little fountains, fluffy beds, and enrichment activities. It was outrageously expensive, but I figured if I was going to drain my rainy day fund on something, it might as well be for them, to soften the trauma they were already going through. When I dropped them off, I found out that Sarah's friend had to get up multiple times during the night to let one of my dogs out because she was sick, vomiting and diarrhea everywhere. I felt horrible about it. I shoved $30 into her hands as a thank you and sent her flowers later as an apology for the hell I'd put her through. But giving up my dogs, even temporarily, shattered me. I know I can still visit them during the day, but handing over their leashes felt like someone reached into my chest and tore my heart out. Later, Sarah met up with me. She didn't cry or hug me. She's not that type, and honestly, neither am I. Instead, she gave me crap for staying with George for so long. Dude, I knew he was a psycho, she said. I was going to call you out before, because you were always crying over him, but I figured you were a grown woman and had your shit together. She told me I should have reached out earlier, said she liked the subtle changes I'd made to my appearance already, and handed me her dark jacket, insisting I wear more muted colors for now. Then, in classic Sarah fashion, she started rattling off how my life reminded her of the 2002 J.Lo movie Enough. She read the entire synopsis to me off Wikipedia and announced that we were going to get drunk and watch it together. I told her I wasn't drinking for now because I was already dancing on the edge of depression, but I promised to bring popcorn balls for our movie night. For a little while, sitting there with Sarah and listening to her sass, I felt human again. That night, my dad called to let me know George had left a threatening voicemail on their public business line. The only way George could have found that number was by Googling their names. That did it for me. I took steps right then to file for a restraining order. The reason I'm even writing all this down is because I don't know how else to make sense of my life right now. When I was a kid, I used to journal through the hard stuff, and this feels the same. Except now, sometimes the journal talks back and says encouraging things. And honestly, I could use the encouragement. So here I am, dumping everything anonymously into the void, hoping it gives me some sort of closure. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But I want to say thank you. Thank you to the strangers online who took time out of their lives to care about me. Some of you wrote long, heartfelt messages, and I read every single one, more than once. You reminded me that I'm still a real person, that I exist beyond George and the hell I've been through. I love sewing dresses, watching David Attenborough documentaries, wasting hours on PC games, planting things in the garden, and losing myself in fantasy novels. I've fought through depression, GAD, and eating disorders. For years I thought I was too weak to survive on my own. But I'm still here, and I want to keep living. For a long time, I described George as this incredible man, smart, funny, ambitious, and so loving. And it's true. He was thoughtful, charming, and he could light up a room. But he's also deeply sick in a way I can't fix. Over the years, he chipped away at my sense of what was normal, what was okay. I fought back sometimes. I even left a few times. But every time, he pulled me back in. He told me I was special, that I was an irreplaceable part of him. And for a girl who never felt like she mattered, that felt like magic. But now, looking back, I see how wrong I was. I see how much I tolerated. Things no one should ever have to. I know he's not purely evil. I don't believe people are all good or all bad. But his actions were toxic, dangerous, and cruel. And if I don't work on myself, I'll end up with another George somewhere down the road. That's why I've started therapy again. I've ordered books to help me heal. Why does he do that? By Lundy Bancroft, The Gift of Fear by Gavin de Becker, and Safe People by Dr. Henry Cloud. It's going to take time. A lot of time. But for the first time in years, I feel like maybe, just maybe, I'm going to be okay.